welcome back to part 2 of our 2-part series on Ugly Betty. Woo.
We could always return to it. This doesn't have to be the end.
I don't think it'll be the end. I think I could talk about Ugly Betty all the time.
Do you
day.
think that quite a few of our listeners may get a little whiplash between like Lord of the Rings and Ugly Betty, or do you think we're going to find our exact niche by kicking off with these?
Carved out this very small Venn diagram, you know, the Lord of the Rings, the Ugly Betty fans, and then we're in the middle. Maybe it's bigger than we think. It probably is. I don't know. I think Ugly Betty was bigger than we thought, which we touched on. I think more people watched it or like discovered it a little bit later. We were kind of in this bubble where we thought we were like the 2 people watching Ugly Betty, and we were just like so cool.
We were cool girls.
We were
Just
not
kidding.
at all
we
cool. We were socially ambiguous, I would say.
Ambiguous feels right. Like,
right?
We were not popular, but we were not bottom tier.
I don't think anyone was like offended by us. I don't think we were totally invisible, but I also don't think that we were really talked about much.
No.
I'm
pretty impressed. We both got superlatives.
I remember people talking to me, to my face, about like, well, I almost voted for so-and-so, but like, you know, you got like, you know, you did this or that.
A weird thing to say.
You know, people say a lot of weird things to you in high school.
One thing is the truth.
A theme, this was not in high school, but people, I actually think this is going to bring out more of my neurodivergent talk, but people used to think that I was like really mean, and I say people like as if everyone who's ever met me, and like I'm not like, I can be surly, but I learned to just smile reflexively, and in college I would just walk around kind of smiling because people just assumed that I wasn't nice. Like multiple people throughout my life have come up to me or had conversations with me like deeper into our friendship and been like, I thought you were really mean or really bitchy, and then I got to know you. Because it was just like a compliment, and I'm like,
weird. Have you watched 30 Rock?
Yeah, but I don't remember a ton.
So there's an episode where Liz Lemon, I don't know if she goes to like a high school reunion, and she's like telling everyone about it and like how like mean and awful everyone was to her in high school, and then she goes to this thing and she finds out that like she didn't have any friends because she was the mean girl. And I watched that episode and I was like, that wasn't Ashley and I, right? Like we were ambiguous. So you're ambiguous. Like that was it.
No. I think the only person I probably was ever like mean to was you. I love you, but you know, we were friends in high school, so like sometimes I don't feel like we ever fought, but you know,
it was just the other day that Evan was pestering me in some terribly annoying way, and he just starts giggling. He goes, I just think it's so funny that me and Ashley have treated you so similar in your life.
You married the male version of me. He's not the male version of me, but in that one particular way where we are so intrigued and at times perturbed by your excessive kindness.
Yes.
That we are like, we're going to break you. Yeah. We're going to break you. Yes, there was a field trip where I was like, I'm going to get you to slap me. I was like, I'm going to get you. And I think by the end of the day, you maybe gave me like a little dead arm because you were like, stop annoying me. And I was like, I did it. I won the field trip.
Sure, Evan will do that to me someday, just like that.
Like, how bored were we?
Oh, very.
This
very
was
bored.
What it came down to. I did put in the notes like a little intro discussion about the show Hacks, which you've watched, right?
I could not love that show any more than I do. I think it is
great.
Perfect.
Really?
Yes.
Perfect. You're coming out.
Yes.
100%. 10 out of 10.
I think it is hysterical. I think the writing is top notch. I think the characters are amazing. which leads us to the reason why you have brought up this show in the first place.
Yeah, so we're technically talking about Ugly Betty again today. But Mark Indelicato plays Justin in Ugly Betty. Great role, great character. He also is in a supporting role in Hacks. He plays Damien, who is Deborah Vance's personal assistant, I believe. Okay, you're the
I believe that's right.
expert here.
Yes.
She has a lot of support staff, but oh yeah, great show. I think it's so impressive to write a show about comedy and about like bad comedy and good comedy, and to actually be able to deliver both.
Right? It's so impressive. Funny. It's so well done.
And it's about woke culture in like a lot of ways, right? Which I think is like an interesting like look at TV today and like the cultural commentary, and then like what was happening with Ugly Betty, where Ugly Betty was trying to do these things but still had to work within the time period that it was given, right? So watching interviews from Silvio Orta, like he had to really advocate to have so many of the like amazing queer representation and queer characters in the show. He had to like work so hard and advocate to like get some of these things just to go by the ABC executives, because you assume that just like writers and it's just writing a good creative story and that they're responsible for the story being told, and if they write a bad character then that's on them, and if they write a certain character a certain way then that's on them. But it's not like that. Like they're having to go through these stodgy, especially back then, like stodgy, exactly who you'd think an ABC executive would be, right? Like, I don't think I have to spell it out. And they would just be like, no. Like, I read it. I don't know if you read one of the million articles that I linked in our notes for today's show, but it was a really interesting article that had an interview clips from Eric Mabius, who played Daniel, on his thoughts as to why the show was canceled. And he essentially thought that the show was canceled because the executives were not happy with Justin's storyline. And that after he came out and they had the first, I think it may have been the first high school male same-sex kiss on television. I don't know that that's true, but it was like not common. It may have been
absolutely
the first one. And after that, he claims that the executives were kind of not supportive of that, representing the network.
Wow.
Yeah. And that then, because we know that after that happened, they put Ugly Betty into what they called a death slot, which is Friday night. So it's where you'd put a show that you kind of want to get canceled to say, oh, it has a ratings drop. Because nobody's like saying, I'm laughing. Nobody's staying home on a Friday night to watch
It was
TV.
our slot. That was our slot.
We watched it. We tried to keep those ratings going. Okay.
We didn't make enough of a difference.
Oh, we're just two people,
sad. We tried.
But I thought that was really like, and in that interview, he's clearly pissed off. He's like, this show ended before it should have for reasons that were wrong, that I do not support, that no one in the cast supports, and basically the overarching information that I got was like the ABC execs, one in particular, I don't know a name, and I wouldn't necessarily want to name names anyway, but there was one executive who no longer is there who was a problem when it came to
oh well, that is such a shame about Ugly Betty. I love the tie-in to talking about Hacks and how they kind of deal with some of these things, because the main characters of a different generation, and you're absolutely right, there's so much. It's not like about woke culture, it's about her like coming to an understanding of the younger generation and
Right.
things like the fact that her writer is not straight. One of my favorite episodes,
Yeah.
spoiler alert for Hacks, skip forward a couple minutes if you haven't watched it.
Also, go watch it.
Yeah, seriously, it's amazing.
It's great.
One of my favorite episodes is when she finally gets invited to that like weekend away with all the old guy comedians, and it's such a big deal for her.
Yeah.
And, you know, keep in mind, she has spent seasons of this show making fun of her writer and like calling her a lesbian in all of these like not very nice ways. And they are kind of railing on young people and different sexualities, and she can't handle it.
Yeah.
She gets very upset by it. And I love that because it's showing those generations of people that are just like that executive at ABC who had it out for Ugly Betty. And it's like it's really representing the struggle that was and the struggle that is still today.
Yeah. And I think the two things that these shows both really kind of bring into light is the line between it's just a joke. You know, there's so many off-putting jokes in Ugly Betty, and some of them just like land and they're so funny, whether they're like politically correct or like about Betty's weight, for example, who's like, she's a extremely normal sized person. There's no normal, but she is just average is the word I'm looking for. An average sized person in a size 00 fashion industry. So there's a lot of fat phobic commentary and like fat shaming, and that's perverse throughout the show. But I think that's a really interesting line, and one that I don't fully think I or anyone knows, like, how do we walk that between just being like, it's comedy, it's jokes, like, how do we poke fun at ourselves? How do we laugh at some of the stereotypes that are funny? Like, we're making fun of millennial stereotypes like,
sure are
a lot, and we're making fun of ourselves, and we're not saying that there's anything wrong, or like the way that we acted in high school was wrong, or these cringy times were wrong. It's just, where is the line when it's then harmful and filled with vitriol and, you know, talking about a minority group maybe that does not need anyone commenting in that way, you know?
So something I think that Ugly Betty did fairly well is that it was most of the time very clear that the jokes like about Betty's weight were not for the audience to laugh at. They were a joke being made by someone being mean. And I think that was usually pretty clear.
Yeah.
Not always. And I mean, this is such a tough conversation. One of my favorite shows to bring up in this particular topic is Curb Your Enthusiasm. Have you ever seen it?
Nope.
It is 12 seasons of Larry David, who's the creator of Seinfeld. He plays like a fictionalized version of himself. It like looks like he's just going about his day and his life. And he's a terrible person. And he says these incredibly awful and offensive things and does incredibly awful and offensive things, like he, the main character and creator of the show. And it is always so clear that he is in the wrong, or he is behind the times, or he faces consequences for it eventually. And it's the show I point to when people are like, oh, you just can't be funny anymore. Like, everybody's so sensitive. I'm like, no, here's a way to do it right. Like, there is a way to poke fun at things while making it clear what's good and bad.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we talked about this last time.
Probably. I have like strong feeling. I loved Curb Your Enthusiasm.
No, and it's so relevant to so many, I think, especially during this time period that we're discussing with all this media, like late 90s, early 2000s. Like, Ugly Betty was one of the few shows like really trying to push the boundaries on representation. And yes, I think I agree. It did a lot right, and it didn't always get it right. And I think that is like, can we expect shows to get it right 100% of the time?
No,
you know?
I don't think we should.
No, I think that sounds exhausting. No, I totally agree. And I think that in Ugly Betty, when people discuss the show now, one of the major issues people have with it is the character of Alexis.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we are not part of the trans community. We are allies. So it is not our place to say how someone should or should not feel about Ugly Betty. And this, that's not ours to comment on.
Yeah.
What I will say is that I did listen to interviews, like I said, from the creator of the show. And the way that he tells about, the character is that basically he did whatever he could to get this character to exist, right?
Yeah.
And so the executives did not want there to be a trans character. And I don't know if it was him or someone else pitched Rebecca Ramon. And at that, they were kind of like, like we could maybe do this if it was with her. And then she was offered the role and she jumped on it. And I want to read a little something that she said, because I had not really thought about, like, how does she feel about this, right? Like,
yeah,
for a cis woman to play a trans woman is not what we'd want in terms of representation in a show. That is what they kind of did what they had to do in order to give this character a chance to be shown on television. And obviously throughout the show, there is a lot of like transphobic jokes and slurs, and the character of Alexis puts up with a lot and like very gracefully, I think, throughout the show. But she also is represented in some ways that were very stereotypical, like her being presented as the villain and violent in the end. Like, I really don't like the way that her character arc, or just her character in general, kind of came to an end. And I guess that's part of why she left the show, was because she wasn't really liking where the character was going. And so and I think whenever a character or an actor or actress decides to leave a show, sometimes they do have to kind of like abruptly like figure a way to get them out of the show, and it usually does feel abrupt because it is.
Right.
Okay, so this was an interview with The Independent. She was explaining how she came as a cisgendered woman to play the role of Alexis. And this is a quote: "The executives at the time didn't love the idea of the character. It was a real boys' club behind the scenes at this point. To try to make it palatable to the boys' club, they pitched me, and I jumped at the chance. I wanted to do that character justice and make her as hot as possible." Which I just really liked. I really liked that. Like, that was not what I was expecting to read. And I was like, I love that, actually. That she was like, I'm gonna make Alexis just like I'm gonna do it, and I'm just gonna make her super hot. And she did.
That is one of the things I appreciate about that character. Again, and I imagine that people in the trans community, some may feel the same, some may feel differently, but I love that they didn't try to add manly features or lean into visual stereotypes. On the other hand, I've read interviews with Laverne Cox, who must be like the most visible trans actor in this time, where she said, like, not every trans person looks like me. Basically, she's saying, I'm hot and I'm getting the roles, but not every trans person looks like me. This is not the universal experience. So I love it, but I also want to acknowledge the other side of that.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and have seen that as well. That there is support of her character, and that she was a well-rounded character. She had problems in regards to her transition and outside of that, and I think that they didn't just make her a one-dimensional character. So yeah, Ugly Betty was very progressive for the time in many ways, and we really appreciate it for that. And one term that I saw about why Ugly Betty was great, which I thought was a really fun term, was that it was multi-culti. It was multicultural.
Never heard that before.
Never once. And I was like, oh my gosh, that is like such a reason why I love Ugly Betty. It's multi-culti.
Multi-culti.
There's so many instances, right, where it's just like celebrating the Suarez's Mexican heritage, and then also like it's poking fun at it a lot. Like they talk about Betty and her, exuberant way. I I feel like it really celebrates a strong Latina main character. And then it also just presents some other characters in ways that are not typical and definitely weren't presented in shows at the time, like men being in therapy.
Yes.
Which, both times it was about men having problems with like sexual addiction, basically, and
That's a good
seeking
point.
therapy. There may have been other instances of men therapy. I'm thinking about Daniel, who briefly sees a sex therapist, but also the sex therapist seems like onto something and like he's going to be helpful for Daniel, and then he just like, instead of thinking about having sex, just like take these drugs.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, that
No.
was not cool.
Like
dudes.
also like street drugs, not like a pharmaceutical that will help,
No.
stabilize any possible like mood disorder or depression or anxiety you may be experiencing. No, it seemed like he was like literally like some kind of narcotic. They don't explicitly say,
Yes.
but he quickly becomes dependent on them. He's literally like trade your addiction.
He just switched. Yeah.
Yeah, which, I know that the writer of the show struggled with addiction, and that was part of something that he wanted to represent in an accurate way was, what really life with addiction is like. Like Claire Mead is another example of that, of just, like a character like constantly navigating like what it's like to live with that. So that's, that therapist, bad. You get an F for therapy there. That's not Daniel's fault. And Matt also sees a therapist.
Yeah.
Regarding, I don't know that it was a sex addiction, but more like an intimacy issue, right? Where he had a really high number and wanted things to be different with Betty, or just, I don't know if he already was trying to find something different, and then Betty, came his way, and, he was navigating that. But, the men, they're still in therapy. They're trying it.
You gotta baby steps sometimes. Baby steps.
It's there. It's there. It's talked about. And not in a way of like, oh, like, what are they doing? It's, I think it's great that it's at least in existence. Then there's, of course, like the women in power. Wilhelmina, fantastic. There's also like the women saving men. I know we talked about this a little bit in part 1, that, maybe Daniel supports Betty more than I give him credit for. But more often than not, like Daniel is the damsel in distress, right? He's the one needing to be saved. Betty is swooping in constantly throughout the show to help Daniel, support Daniel, get Daniel out of trouble, even legal trouble.
True.
He's the damsel in distress. So it's like, I feel like it's kind of a gender swap, right? Where like Betty's got it together and Daniel's just kind of a shit show.
Yes, very much so.
And she's like helping him get together. And then we kind of were talking about this, but also the character of Nick. Do you remember Alexis's assistant, Nick?
Yes, Max Greenfield.
Love that actor.
Yes.
Love the character because he's such a douche.
Yeah. And he is all in for that character.
All in. He plays it so well. And I feel like he as a character is the plot device to be like, this type of person, this type of humor is the problem. The low-hanging fruit. Just like he'll literally just be like, oh, Betty, like, because she's fat, haha, and be like pounding it with his friends.
There's no ambiguity there.
No, he's just presented as such a classic frat boy who then like gets into finance, and it's just like, ugh.
With all of this though, total frat guy, like makes the dumbest jokes about women and all of this, but his idol is a trans woman. He loves working for Alexis.
Oh yeah. And he's like, from what we can see, like he didn't say a bad word against Alexis that I recall, or even a joke or anything.
But he's not fakely supportive of that. It's just like, she is a multifaceted character, and this is one of the ways in which they let her be that.
That's true. I think that also goes to your point of none of the quote unquote villains of the show are 100% 100% villains.
Nick comes closer.
He's close. He's close, but he still has a few moments. I feel like there's another moment I was thinking of, but I think it is just like the way that he is with Alexis, where it's like he's doing his job and trying to do a good job. And whether that's because he truly respects her or just because he wants to be successful and he realizes it's like a means to an end, you know, he still is. There are worse people out there than Nick.
Mm-hmm.
Also, when I was doing my deep dive into Ugly Betty, because I don't know, I go down the wormholes, you know this. So I want to tell you that on IMDb, so there are 85 episodes of Ugly Betty.
Okay.
On IMDb, every single one of the episodes is rated as a 7 out of 10 or higher.
As they deserve.
As they should be. Okay.
Yes.
So I want to just go through a couple of my favorite episodes. I feel like I went so ham. Like literally just all these thoughts on Ugly Betty poured out of me. Okay, so the first episode that comes to mind for me is one that's just kind of a cute memory more so than like, oh, this episode is incredible. It's a good episode. So it's season 1, episode 10, just called Fake Plastic Snow. So this is when Betty's planning the Christmas Eve staff party. So it's like I don't know that it's on Christmas Eve, but it's a staff party and it's happening at Mode. She's trying to make it fun and festive. And the reason why I love this episode is one, because it's Christmassy. Come on.
Of course. Yes.
It's overflowing with Christmas cheer. And I love that. Have always loved that. And I used to do this little thing where I wake up early. I always have. And now that I have a baby, I sleep when I can. So I don't wake up as early. When he does, I do. Anyway, on Christmas Eve, I'd be up before the rest of my family. And, you know, at this point, it was in a teen, like late teens, maybe even early 20s. I'd be like going home for Christmas. And, you know, you're not a child anymore. So it's like, I'm like, wake up, family. Let's get Christmas going. So I would always put on this episode when I'd wake up and I'd watch it at this teeny little like TV DVD combo.
Oh, yeah. I remember that. Yeah.
I wish I still had it. I feel like I would totally use that.
Yeah.
I'd have it like up here in my little office and I just would pop my old DVDs in it.
That'd be magical. There's something
great.
about the physical media. Something to miss about that. R.I.P. Redbox.
I know. I actually still have like several DVDs. I have a decent collection.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, I do. I love physical media. I think it just, we talked about, just like holding the book, you know? Didn't we say we just people who like to hold a book? Yeah. Also, hold on, I'm on one. I forgot to tell you. I started reading The Lord of the Rings.
Okay, how is that experience? How far are you? Tell me everything.
I'm on page 444. I know, because every page is a struggle. That is, yeah, okay. On the one hand, loving it, because as you mentioned, so many direct quotes, and I'm reading them aloud to Chris. We're laying there, he's trying to, you know, doom scroll as normal people do, and I'm like in Gandalf voice being like, it's quite cool. He's like, all right, I get it. Anyway, I feel proud of myself. I feel
it's a feat.
Not legitimate and not proud in other ways, because am I skimming through and glazing over a few paragraphs? Yes, I am.
Yeah. You don't need to know about the color and texture of every leaf in the Shire.
So yeah, that's happening. Stay tuned. Will I make it through the series? Yes. Could it take several years? Also, yes. We'll see what happens.
Totally fine.
Okay, so there's one more episode that we kind of already talked about in part 1. So this is Ugly Betty. This is our Ugly Betty episode. So this was season 1, episode 16. This was Derailed, rated 7.8 on IMDb. So this is one of those episodes. There's so many. I think when I tried to write out like what happens in the episode, it's impossible. So much happens in one single episode.
Yes.
Okay, so this is the episode where Betty meets Charlie, Henry's ex-girlfriend who moves. So they meet. And then Betty ditches her on the train. Henry and Betty almost kiss. Then Charlie emerges from getting lost on the train. Suddenly that made her love New York. Did not buy that little
No, that is such a stressful experience.
Oh my
Absolutely
gosh.
not.
She said something about how she like it's just pulled a knife on someone and then he gave me directions and now I love New York. And I'm like, sure. So then this is also when we get the start of the Grace Chin lawyer plotline.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so
That's
that
right.
happens. And then Mark is also helping Christina make the dress for Sarah Jessica Parker, because she is like
Yes.
got that opportunity through Wilhelmina to do the fashion show, but then Wilhelmina's holding that over her head. So in the end, Christina's like, I'm not one of your flying monkeys, Wilhelmina. And then Wilhelmina like destroys the opportunity, makes the call. And
Yeah.
and then this is also the episode where Wilhelmina is still trying to complete the ongoing plot line of like why Alexis came back, and she's like seeking revenge on her father, but she's very lonely and expresses that, and Wilhelmina is using this as leverage to get their plan to take over the company back on track, but then also is low-key an amazing friend and punches out the guy in the bar.
Yeah.
Right? Didn't have to do that. Like that felt genuine. That punch was genuine. Like it was the punch heard around the world. I loved that punch. I don't support violence.
No, but it's a soap opera. We're suspending disbelief or something.
Yeah. And as a soap opera, I support that punch. Okay. And then this is the same episode. We're not done. Where Santos and Hilda and Justin are on the train? Yes. Okay. There's two different times on the train. Okay, sorry. So this is the time that we were talking about in episode 1, where Santos, Hilda, and Justin, they're going to see a musical performance, and Justin is like doing his performance because the train breaks down.
Oh, yes.
And then Santos ends up defending Justin. And then at the end of the episode, I have to bring out this one little detail. There's an amazing melancholic outro. Everyone's like moping. Things didn't go their way for a lot of them. And it's set to the song What Goes Around Comes Back Around by Justin Timberlake. Yes.
So now it'll be stuck in my head forever and ever and ever.
I know. It's so good.
All right. So one of my favorite episodes we have really already, I think, talked about as much as we need to. It is season 2, episode 1. It's titled How Betty Got Her Grief Back. And this is the episode where Hilda thinks that Santos is still alive. And obviously I was tricked by this in high school, so I'm sure there's like some lingering feelings. It's just so well done. It's so devastating. The show isn't often that emotional, but that is such a big one. That moment where Daniel is really going through some shit that episode, but he really comes through for Betty, like seeks Betty out and comes through for her. Like she doesn't even have to like say that something's wrong. He finds her at the French fry stand.
Oh, yeah.
Like, because he knows he would be able to find her. I love that when she's like, it's at a bar. She's like, hit me again. He goes, this is your third one. She says something like, make him chili fries this time. It's so cheesy. It's so good.
Yeah, that's good.
It's just like a great Daniel moment there. Justin sneaking into mode because he didn't like summer camp and making macaroni necklaces and like ending up like helping Wilhelmina in her calling a little fashion elf, and he ends up getting an internship at Mode in future episodes. And then of course this episode is where Amanda goes home and she's like trying to find out who her parents were, which is, one of her main plot points. And she surprises her parents at home, and her parents come down wearing those robes, and then another couple comes wearing robes. And I just
forgot about that.
So silly and goofy. I mean, Amanda's parents are always very funny on like the very rare episodes they're on. They're just like little space cadets, and they're hysterical. So that is one of them. Then another one, season 3, episode 15, it's called There's No Place Like Mode. And this is when Betty goes to interview the designer Heinrich. He's like,
I love that one.
Right? Like he is wild. I love him. Betty writes this like sassy fake press release, and that's accidentally what gets published, but then everybody loves it. But what is so great about this episode to me is this is where it finally clicks for Betty. So we are more than 3.5 seasons into the show, and she is finally like, I understand fashion now. She says it's art. It is another way of expressing what is on the inside, on the outside. And
Yes.
it's great. Like she connects with it. She connects with Heinrich before she even fully gets it. He loves her. He keeps saying like, and now we will make love.
Yeah.
Like he loves her.
I know. I love that. I love that repeating line because it's like
Yes.
it's so creepy and off-putting, but also
and not
like
Betty.
not. Yeah. And she just is like, okay, no, thank you. And he's
Right.
like, anyway, moving on.
It's very earnest on both sides. There's like not actually
Right.
anything creepy out. Yeah, I love it. I love it.
That's such a good one.
Yes. And then Bernadette Peters is in this episode in her role in Yeti. So like I obviously love that.
Why do you love her so much?
Oh, she is just a musical theater icon.
Okay. So you just like her for like the actress herself.
Yeah. And
more so.
If you'll notice a trend in the things I like, whenever she like does these guest roles, she's always somebody like ridiculous and dramatic. I always love that. Yeah.
No, she's a good character.
I also just think her voice, like her speaking voice, is so different and very interesting. I like her a lot.
Yeah. She is very like visually interesting to look at too. I love her hair in Ugly Betty. She's got like beautiful curls and she's fun.
Yeah. Oh my God, her hair is amazing.
It
okay,
is.
and so much happens in this episode, as in all of them. But this episode is one of, if not the best episode ending ever. So Christina is pregnant with Wilhelmina's child, and we have not really talked about Christina at all. Christina is amazing. She is just like a solid foundation of the show.
She's great.
I love Christina. And she goes into labor, but the Berlin Wall that Betty has built as the background for this fashion show is blocking the rear exits. So Christina has to go out on the runway with Betty to exit, but then she's like, nope, it's happening here. And Wilhelmina, who has recently become irrelevant, like the paparazzi doesn't like her. She's not getting the same invites because she's been having her little personal life with Connor, sees this moment, and she gets the models who are in those ridiculous glass and metal outfits, and they have those big metal wings. She gets the models to all stand around Christina. Christina gives birth on the runway, and then Wilhelmina rises up out of the models with the child. It is so perfectly
Mark
absurd.
is in the background. He's like, cue the music, cue the lights, cue the hydraulic lift. So
exactly.
Good. Oh yeah, that is peak telenovela right there.
It is so amazing. And you know what? It's another episode where at the end, Daniel is like, Betty, this was amazing. You did such a phenomenal job. It's just another one of those like little moments. I'm telling you.
Yeah, he's great. Blah, blah. Sarah loves Daniel.
Yeah.
Love it. Okay. Those are so good. Do you have more?
It's the series finale. I am a sucker for series finales. I love a good series finale. I will make so many apologies for things that maybe could have been better in finales. I'll be like, no, it's good that they left it that way. It's good. Like, I just
You're
love
a finale apologist.
I am a finale apologist. I love a sense of closure.
Yeah.
I love a sense of like a next step. I love a series finale. This one's great. We've already talked about the Daniel and Betty thing plenty, so I will not bring up my feelings on that. But I feel like everybody is in a great place. Like, obviously, Hilda and Bobby and Justin are moving to the city, and they're all worried about Ignacio, who is like, I finally get this house to myself. It's about time. I think that is great. Mark is already an assistant editor, but Wilhelmina implies that he's going to get a promotion, which is because Daniel has stepped down and she finally gets to be editor-in-chief of Mode, which she truly has deserved this whole time. I mean, it is like everything comes together so well. I love seeing Betty and Claire at the end, and Claire tells Betty she's so proud of her. That is such a nice relationship that they have built. Amanda has the funeral for her dog Halston, and she keeps scattering his ashes around the office, and then she finds out that the man that she was hired to be a stylist for is her father, which has been like her arc throughout this whole thing, is finding out who her parents were. I mean, it is beautiful. It is a fantastic series finale. No notes.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think especially given that I don't know if they knew going into the fourth season that it was going to be the last season, or if like, you know, even like as a writer, if they were like mentally expecting there to be more seasons and then to be able to wrap everything up in a way that feels good and genuine and like does so many of the characters justice. I feel like that's so rare. And I think that's part of the thing that I don't always love when we're comparing TV shows and movies is that TV shows have this constant arc, up, down, up, down, up, down. A little bit of closure to keep you satisfied, and then a new rift, right? So like the whole Henry thing, right? He's in, he's out, he's in, he's out. We don't know when we're gonna be done with him, if ever. Are we gonna have closure on that relationship?
Right.
Which they did give us. And I'm glad that was not the way that they went. Was like it seemed like they were going to get back together, and I love how they illustrated how much they've grown apart and how they're just totally different people than and in different places in their lives. And then it just didn't click because I feel like that is so rare in a show where you're like you would expect him to come back and the timing to be right, and he's back in New York, and then they're just together. And that's not what happened.
No.
I do find series finales a little bit sad, personally. Especially for a show. I love. It's, you know, for me, like, it was really sad for that show to end. And I definitely get I get this. Even if I'm watching a movie, sometimes I'll pause it to see how much is left, to see how much more time I get to spend with the characters. This is really embarrassing. Well, the same thing with shows. That's the end, and like that's the end of the story. And you know, we haven't gotten anything else. Like we've never gotten a continuation of Ugly Betty's story, at least, you know, the way that it was told for that show. And so it's just kind of like that's it. We're saying goodbye to that show, and it was very well done, but it was still sad for me.
Oh, that's fair. It was sad for me too, but I enjoy that particular brand of sadness. I'm very weird, and that came out very weird, but I stand by it.
Oh, it's a good flavor. Good flavor of sad. It's true. If like of all the flavors of sad, like being like, oh, I enjoyed that. Now it's done. That's not a bad one. It's called pre-nostalgia, I think.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, where it's like you're like, you know that you're going to be nostalgic for this later. You know, you're kind of a little bit.
This.
Yeah, it's a thing. Look into it. All right, I'm going to give you the rest of my favorites. So we're going back to season 2. Do you remember the episode Secretary's Day?
Yes, I did rewatch it for this.
Oh,
phenomenal.
Perfect. So good. So they're going to the Middle Ages themed restaurant in this. And this is peak Max Greenfield as Nick. He is so douchey throughout this entire episode. Right? And this is the example of what we're talking about, where he is used as a device to show like this is what's bad. This is what bad jokes are. Just someone being an idiot. So Nick walks into the Middle Ages alongside Mark and Amanda and just looks around and says to Mark and Amanda, "It's so gay." And Mark just looks over at him, like clearly pissed off, being like, "No, it's not." No.
But like not even pissed off. It's just like,
it's just not.
No, it's
like, it's not.
It's medieval times.
Right. And so then he, like, there's the whole Betty trying to like win the money in order to fly Ignacio home to Mexico because we're in the whole immigration crisis. And there's so many things about the show that I was realizing as I was watching that are just like such raw issues. I do want to acknowledge that these are like, the show is like really highlighting so many issues of like when we are recording this episode and when it's being released, that are just such like raw, like really, really challenging issues going on for people right now. And just want to acknowledge that this is just, we don't want this to be a podcast where we're like really down in the dumps. Like, we're trying to make this like a comfortable, safe space for people. But I think with that, we need to acknowledge that like the world is a really dark and challenging place sometimes. And right now is one of those times. Anyway, back to freaking Max Greenfield. Okay, so Betty's on the mechanical horse and he just shouts, "You're going to break the horse, Betty," and then turns to his friends to give them knucks, being like, "You get it? Because she's fat." It's like, okay, what a freaking idiot. So then we're also like, I don't know, his whole character is just so on the nose. I feel like and he plays it so well and really commits to it. And I guess it's just really illustrating that low-hanging fruit. He's just grabbing it, just, this is what is not funny. It's funny in that he's so cringy and awful. Yeah. At the same time, we're getting into Daniel's sex addiction. So that's going on. Alexis finds out that the man that she's been seeing is being bribed by her father to get her out of the country. She's devastated by that. Yeah. Hilda's got her cosmetology stuff going on. I put in the a little side note, like, finally left her multi-level marketing scheme. Because I feel like in high school I didn't fully acknowledge that, like, when we get into the show, Hilda's just in a full-on MLM. Oh, just selling these, like, sketchy products.
Like, totally agreed. Did not understand that the first time around.
No. And then watching it back, I was like, oh, man, there it is.
Was it Herbalife? Isn't that, like, a real thing?
Herbalux?
I think
it was called in the show.
And in real life, it might be Herbalife.
That may have been what they did there. And then this is the one where Wilhelmina gets Mark to beat her up to try to, like, show, because she's pursuing Bradford and trying to show that, like, Claire's not this great person, but really it's just Wilhelmina's being Wilhelmina.
Yeah.
Then the next episode I have was Bad Amanda.
Another great one.
So good. I love when Amanda is talking about Bad Ronald. That's like how they come up with the name for the episode, Bad Amanda, because she's living with Betty at this point because she was squatting at Mode, then got kicked out, needed a place to stay. Betty, being the person that she is, lets her come in, but she's being Amanda, being a terrible roommate, mooching off Betty, not paying rent, eating Betty's groceries, doing all of these things, and she's blaming it on Bad Ronald. She says it's just like Bad Ronald, this like ghost or human or someone who like lives in the walls and comes out and does these things, and then, you know, she's just, the scapegoat for Bad Ronald. At one point at the end of the episode, Betty, like, genuinely frustrated and mad, is like, "There's no Bad Ronald, it's Bad Amanda." But I think this episode is so fun. They're just like doing hijinks around New York. I just loved I loved this whole episode. I think it was so much fun.
Agreed.
And this episode was also like the Connor, Molly, Wilhelmina, Daniel, like that love quadrangle that happened was like really, really ramping up. So I also liked seeing when Wilhelmina feels awkward around Connor and just starts talking like a fool.
Oh, it's amazing.
Those moments are so funny.
Yes.
And where Mark's like always in the background, like, stop talking. Just cut it out. Blackout was my season 4 pick. So I think this is why I was getting confused about. I was like, wait, who is on the train when and where? Because this is another one where Hilda and Justin are on the train during this citywide blackout. Right. But I think this was a great episode. This is when Ignacio and Bobby finally bond,
which is really cute.
Super cute. I loved that whole him rolling his eyes at the scary movie, and then like him getting really into it, and then the blackout happening and him freaking out. Oh, I love that whole montage. And then Betty is trying to like get back in the good graces. Well, she's trying to get to know her neighbors because she's afraid that she's gonna die alone and no one will notice. Then she's also trying to get back into their good graces because she, being the naive, sweet person that she is, lets these two thieves into the building. And so she steals like this project that Mark was working on. And I love the whole Betty and Mark dynamic where Betty's like, talking to Mark about how negative he is, and he's just being like, you are unrealistically peppy, and like things don't always work out.
Yeah.
And they kind of just have this back and forth throughout the whole episode.
Yeah.
And then we think things haven't worked out for Mark, but then it ends up, that they have. And
yes,
it's a fun episode. I also really like the line where Betty is singing karaoke at the neighbor party, and then the blackout happens, and Amanda is like, Betty's voice has brought darkness to the land.
Oh, Amanda is so great.
There's so many times where Amanda is just my exact brand of humor. It's just so funny. That's like, making fun of Betty, but in a way that was just like, yeah, she's just singing horribly. And then, just so spot on. Love it. Great show. So hard to pick favorite episodes.
Agreed.
Okay, I think really the last little thing that I wanted to talk about was just about a few of the side characters and discussions of if they were villains or not.
Okay. I love it. I'm here for it. I'm ready.
Basically, we're deciding, was this character justified? Were they the bad guy? Are they really the villain? Someone else the villain? Are they the problem? Anyway, you get it.
Okay. Great.
First up, Walter.
Yes, for being so boring.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say victim. He's like plays a very victim-y, whiny. We know I don't like whiny people. We know you don't like boring people.
Mm-mm.
He was both. He was holding Betty back. He was so clingy and needy. He cheats on Betty.
Yeah. See, I think we can call him a villain.
Okay, fair enough. Moving on. Okay, next is Sophia Reyes. Is she a villain? I know you're a Daniel lover. She did him real dirty.
Yeah, like I'm a Daniel and Betty lover, and I am a full Daniel lover by the end, but like Daniel was kind of trash back then. Yeah. So I like don't feel that bad for him.
And she said that to him. She basically was like, I just did to you what you've done to many women, but also kind of not. Like I feel was a philanderer. I think that's the right term. But he wasn't leading people on to get them to fall in love to the point of a proposal and then being like, oh, it was all a lie, actually.
Yeah.
I don't think it's fair to say that she was just giving him a taste of his own medicine.
I think we could call her a villain with a victim we don't feel that bad for at this point.
Yeah. And I also really liked her as a character, and I like how supportive she was of Betty at a time when Daniel, I think, maybe you have a different opinion, I think was not being supportive of Betty. She was trying to further Betty's career. I remember Betty almost became her assistant, and she definitely was at this point more invested in Betty's writing and voice, and Daniel was more just like, your voice still doesn't fit in at this magazine.
Yeah.
Which was probably true. And he was nice about it. He rejected her in a very nice way.
It's true. It's true.
I liked her. I'm going to say not a villain. I'm going to say not a villain.
All right. I'll join you there.
Next up, Charlie. Okay. So Henry is the real villain here, and I'm going to agree with you on that one.
Clear.
He was very in love with Betty, clearly, and then did not just break up with Charlie out of guilt.
Right. We've talked about how awful he is to Betty. He's also awful to Charlie.
Awful to Charlie. So I feel a lot of compassion for her now, but she also then like weaponizes her pregnancy, which is not great.
No.
Once her and Henry are done, and he's like with Betty, and she's like, I'm gonna try to sabotage you. I still think, though, I'm gonna say Charlie's not a villain. I think she was in a very difficult situation and did some questionable things. But if I got pregnant with someone's child while they were in love with someone else and then had to deal with that, I don't know what I would do. I don't think it would be clean.
That's hard. Yeah.
I'm going to say not a villain.
Fair. Not a villain.
Okay. Next one is Dr. Farkas. I just wanted to talk about him.
Dr.
Anyway.
Farkas is a villain.
Agreed. Okay. So there's an episode where he's having like a sexual fantasy about Betty. Granted, Betty previously had asked him out on a date, right? So even though it was a very comically failed date, she still didn't open that door. So it's not like she opened that door basically to use him because she could tell he was already interested in her. But this is another lack of professional boundaries. It's just something that I'm very sensitive about, even when fictionalized. As a healthcare provider, I am like, we do not cross this line.
Guys.
Come on.
Yes.
Come on. He's a villain. I don't like him. Anyway, moving on. Okay. Curious to hear your thoughts on Zachary Boole. Minor character. Only in one episode.
This one's so black and white to me. It's like one of like the true black and whites.
Okay. So I feel like maybe because like I had a crush on him.
Well, yeah, he was very handsome.
He gets like points for just like being cute with me because I guess I'm shallow enough to be like he's he's an okay guy because he's pretty cute. But okay, I guess what I'm thinking, I'm like, is he as bad as like how you really think he is? I felt like maybe he actually liked Betty and just was like a typical, like, I don't know, I feel like I know this guy and I don't think this guy is bad, but like maybe immature. And if he had met yeah, it's still
Betty
bad.
Deserves better than that. He's treated her pretty poorly.
He did. Did he deserve to get punched?
Probably not. But like, who in this show hasn't been punched at some point?
It's true. I do think the punch, like, I was not ready for it. And he's like, be spontaneous. Do what you want to do. And she just like slugs him. And I'm like, all right.
Sure.
Yeah. I do want to read though, like, okay, so after this, I agree. Okay, villain. He's a villain, right? I'm just gonna say it. I'm gonna say it. He's a hot villain. Okay, but then after this situation, this is like Justin's also having a hard time in this episode, and Hilda just gives so many good pep talks in this show. Okay, she's the queen. Yeah. We think Betty is the queen of pep talks to Daniel. She gives a good one. Hilda's are the most eloquent, beautiful. Ugh, I love them. So I'm gonna read. Yeah, I'm going to read one because I feel like we haven't given enough Hilda appreciation.
Okay,
I love
great.
Hilda. Somehow you got it in your head that this is your story, but you got to let that go. You're starting to come up with a whole new story for yourself. You are who you are. And the sooner you're okay with that, the sooner you see what I see, the happier you're going to be.
Oh, Hilda.
And she's saying that, and Justin's sitting on the stairs listening to it because he's having his, like, I think that this may have been when he kissed, what was his after that boyfriend's name, but like they kissed, and that and I think he's like, obviously having a lot of emotions about this, and I think he's sitting on the stairs hearing that, even though she's saying it to Betty, it's like resonating with him, and it's so
Hilda's amazing.
Love that. She's so good. Okay, next one is Nico. Interesting character, strange storyline.
You're gonna have to give
season.
me some context for Nico. I don't remember Nico.
Okay, so Nico was Wilhelmina's daughter. She was in the first season, and it was definitely showing the Wilhelmina.
Oh yes, okay, this is coming back to me.
Yeah. Wilhelmina's not she's an absent mother. Basically, has chosen her career over being there for her child. It's just kind of shipping her off to school, and she's rebelling, trying to get attention, etc. So that kind of all was like, whatever. And then at the end of the series, she quote unquote gets a nose job, which just means they changed actresses.
Yeah.
It was playing Nico, and it's played by one of the contestants from America's Next Top Model. We can talk about how damaging that show was another day.
Oof.
Not today.
No.
She was a contestant and then plays Nico, and she's an okay actress for like not having acted, as far as I know, before this. But then she has this elaborate plot to basically like extort her mother, like to steal money from her, like with her boyfriend. It's like goes on for episodes and episodes and episodes. Mm-hmm. Mark and Wilhelmina have a little rift about it, and then it turns out that like Nico is doing wrong. And once Wilhelmina finds that out,
Hold on. I'm so
No
sorry.
problem.
We're so close to being done. It's my Sephora delivery. My Black Honey Arwen lipstick is here.
Wait, you have to put this
Sorry.
in the episode.
I
That we had
will.
to
I will.
pause so that you could get what you were talking about at the beginning of the
Yes.
episode delivered. Why do they need to ring your doorbell to deliver you lipstick?
I don't know.
Is the real
Like,
question.
it was long gone before I got out there too.
Oh, we'll wrap it up. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, basically Nico is like, I thought you'd be proud of me. Like I, kind of, but I don't know, became who you are, a bad person.
Yeah.
I don't know. It was a thin argument. Wilhelmina was not proud, and basically it's left as like a kind of like we're done. Like we're done. We're not talking to each other anymore. I think she's a villain. But I don't really feel like she was the best well-rounded character. Clearly not. You forgot her.
Completely.
Not super memorable. And then let's see. Matt. Do you think Matt was the villain?
I mean, yes, but
We've
in like
talked
the
about him.
laziest way. Like they literally
Yeah.
made him a villain, and then he's like, "I'm gonna go be a white savior," and I'm done with it.
Yeah, not great. Not great. I guess the one, point of contention was Betty did cheat on him, so
Yeah.
was lashing out somewhat justified, and he was obviously heartbroken. Like he clearly loved Betty, was very invested in their relationship. But yeah, I'll say villain too.
Yeah. Okay, great. For being boring, him and Walter.
Yeah. You're like, whatever, all this other stuff, boring. All right, now this one maybe will be interesting. I don't know. You've been pretty black and white on this. But the last one I have is Bradford Mead. Was he a villain?
Oh, I think this one is kind of tough.
Yeah, he was a very
tough.
complex character. He rejected Alexis. He was a serial cheater. He rejected Daniel in different ways. Like Daniel was like the Faramir to Alexis's Boromir for sure.
Right.
Where he was just like, you're just the younger kind of useless son. I don't, really need you. I think he's a villain. I think he showed growth, but not enough to redeem the sins of his past.
I will fully support that. Bradford Mead,
right?
Villain.
I liked that he redeemed himself and tried to make amends in some ways. In the end, but it was kind of like, oh, it's just too little, too late.
Like no character is 100% villain, but he's on that side of the spectrum.
Oh, okay. So I have my like little outro. Did you know segment?
I love trivia, so
we'll do it. Okay, so I do kind of like this because we get to talk about the episode where there's a drag queen like parody act of Wilhelmina.
Okay. Oh yes, right? I remember this.
Okay, and the like drag name is Wilheldiva Hater. Okay, that's not the trivia. That just looks great.
Yes.
What I did not know is that the actor who plays that character is named Chris Williams, and it's actually Vanessa Williams' brother.
That's phenomenal. That's
right?
So good.
And I just knew him as Dwight from Dodgeball. Also,
I love how often we've been talking about Dodgeball.
Also, right? White Goodman is the name that we could not think of.
Thank you.
Doesn't that feel good?
It feels like I've been like waiting for that.
Right? I put it in all caps because I was like,
thank you. Thank you.
We did it. Our brains can stop trying to like sift through all the crap to find that.
Yes.
All right, we're signing off. This has gone on long enough. What are we going to be back with next time?
I think we're talking cozy towns.
Oh, excellent. Okay, so technically we are a comfort media, cozy media. We're not a Lord of the Rings or Ugly Betty fan podcast, although we probably could be. So yeah, we're going to dive into cozy settings and movies and towns that we love next week. So hope to see you there, hear you there, be you there. I don't know. Bye.